Joining us now for a brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Reuben. Good morning, Bimbai. And good morning, Rufai. Good morning to you all. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you've had a good weekend, an eventful weekend. Good to hear from you. Let me tell you about what is happening around the world. Let's start in the United States. We are just a day away from Election Day. Election Day is at long last almost here. It is tomorrow. And naturally, both main candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, are putting the finishing touches on their campaigns. Both of them been campaigning quite aggressively over the weekend. And of course, into today, this is the final stretch now. And as you can imagine, both sides are trying to shore up votes, but definitely tie up any loose ends. So for example, for Kamala Harris, it's trying to duck and dive away from questions about her past as a California prosecutor, her votes on criminal reform, and then of course with Trump too, his campaign have had the task of trying to clear up any type of criticism people might have had about his comments to do with shooting the media. So again, in this last stretch, it hasn't been easy or plain sailing for either candidate. It is still a vote, a race that is so close, very, very difficult to call either way. And we will be taking you along this entire process. Now, staying with the elections though, we do know that over the weekend, Kamala Harris did have an appearance on Saturday Night Live SNL. She was on for about 1:30 alongside Maya Rudolph, a very, very funny skit that the two of them had. But then there was criticisms that perhaps NBC was flouting the FCC's, the Federal Communication Corporation's rules on equal airtime, essentially, especially when it comes to political candidates. They have to get the same amount of airtime. So to appease Trump and to also follow the spirit of that rule, the NBC did play a free Trump ad during a NASCAR showing on Sunday, just to even out the playing field there. So again, very, very interesting. It's definitely an election that's going to have ramifications for the rest of the world. Naturally, what happens in America is something that the world will be paying attention to. And as I said, with 75 million votes already casted, 75 million people have already casted their votes, it's still too close to call either way. Moving on to the United Kingdom, standing here in Westminster, and as we know, Kemi Badenoch has been elected leader of the Conservative Party. It is a historic feat. It's one that some people, perhaps me, didn't actually think was going to happen, but it did happen, and it is clearly a historic moment for her. She is now the first black woman to be the leader of any political party, any major political party in the United Kingdom. It is quite a huge feat. And when you look at the reactions to this news across the world, it's definitely been mixed. In Nigeria, for example, if you look at social media and what people have had to say, it has been quite mixed. There are definitely a lion's share of people who feel quite proud of the representation of the Nigerian diaspora and are proud to see a Nigerian woman, someone who grew up in Nigeria, be able to reach these types of heights in the United Kingdom. But at the same time, in Nigeria, here in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, there are also concerns, legitimate concerns over what Kemi Badenoch's representation of Black British or Black British Nigerian identity will look like. She is somebody who's portrayed to be anti-woke, quite hard on immigration, hard on maternity pay, hard on a lot of things that have allowed her to be a palatable candidate to the Conservative Party. That being said, it is something that has definitely been welcomed. Now, I am a woman of my word. If you remember a few months ago, my friends, I did say that if Kemi Badenoch was elected to become the leader of the Conservative Party, I did say that I would eat Dr. Reuben's bow tie. I'm in London, you guys are in Lagos, so clearly I cannot eat his bow tie. However, what I have is a sweetie in my pocket, which I will turn into a bow tie, and I will eat that as I tell you about the next stories that we have coming up on the show. Because you know me, I won't let you guys come and Barry or Lemmy Laurie, you won't come and shout in my head, yes, I said it, I was wrong. I was wrong, and it happened. It happened. So, as I eat my humble pie and my bow tie, let me tell you about what else is happening around the world. And unfortunately, It is quite a serious story, so let me tell you what's happening. Again, this is another story that focuses on Nigeria. You mentioned it at the beginning of the show. Many minors were brought into court over the weekend, on Friday and over the weekend, charged with very serious crimes, treason and the like, because of their participation in the #EndBadGovernance protest. Now, these people are not only younger Nigerians, but also older ones too. But specifically what we are focusing on is the prosecution of minors. Children, according to charge sheets that were seen at the court in Abuja, children as young as 14 years old were in the courtroom. We did see reports, we did actually see images of a person fall to the ground because they were malnourished. And you remember, if we cast our minds back to when they were first detained, Amnesty International called this a sham trial. And here we are, we can see that this is not the way that governance should be. This is not the way the judiciary should be. And it's a story that has also dominated many Nigerian papers this morning. But before we get into the papers, my friends, tell me about what you have to say about the stories on the World Brief this morning.
Okay, Femi, I'd like to talk about Kemi Badenoch. And I was one of those that went against Kemi Badenoch because of the things she said. Yes, it's a momentous occasion for us as black people. I mean, when you go back and read the works of the lives of Olaudah Equiano, and you see from slavery what the black people have achieved in the UK, you get excited. But I'm not excited because of his Kemi Badenoch, because of the things she said about our people. I don't feel you need to throw your people under the bus to be able to get the approval of the same white man that enslaved your people over the years. I don't feel it's fair to say that migrants do all sorts of jobs and things like that. And some other things she said in the past that I can't even remember because they were too numerous and there was a lot of bollocks and rubbish she said in the past. So, yes, it's a momentous occasion, but I'm not excited. You've just thrown your people under the bus. And when you also look at it, now there's been talks in the Conservative Party that can she even lead the party to the next election? Because one, this was one of the first times the margins were really small compared to the Rishi Sunak margin. And a lot of people didn't come out to vote. A lot of people did sit out the elections and all of that. Yes, but she was able to appeal to the hard right. But I feel when it comes to politics at the end, your personal conviction and not destroying your origins in the name of getting political favors should be the order of the day. If Kemi had taken that up heritage proudly and not said all the crazy things she said about, maybe I would have been more about Nigeria. I'll have been more triumphalist. I'm not saying Nigeria doesn't have its issues. I also say those things every day here that, these are the issues of Nigeria. But taking it to the extreme, to the point of saying that, neighbors were always screaming every night, they were always attacked. I mean, Kemi lived a sheltered life in Nigeria. She was even talking like we don't even live in Nigeria. Things are bad, yes, but not as bad as Kemi painted it. So that's the mixed reaction for me. But congrats to her. Wish her the very best. But I don't care one bit about what she does and what she becomes in the end.
All right. Very quickly, to the U.S. election is down to the wire. This is such a tight race. Any analysis you read or listen to or watch is just nobody knows what's going to happen in the next few days. It's such a close race. However, you have the closing arguments coming in now, the final push, and ultimately it's coming down to Donald Trump, who has, of course, maintained his style of being a little bit on the controversial side and combative side with regards to his rhetoric to his opponent. However, he has been consistent with regards to his position on policy. Now, whether you agree with it or you don't, he has consistently reeled out his policies at most opportunities he's been given to speak. Now, on the flip side, Kamala Harris is coming out today. I believe she's going to have Oprah, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Ricky Martin. In the past, we already know she's had Beyonce, she's had Usher, she's had a star-studded campaign. So it'll be interesting to see how much the star power does for the machine that is the Democratic Party, and also how much the rhetoric that her campaign has largely been dominated with advising Americans against another Trump presidency. So we haven't seen as much policy communication from her, but more of a sentimental approach saying, well, this is who Donald Trump is. Are you sure you want him back? So I'm along with most of the free world, waiting with bated breath to see which way Americans decide to go, because it is going to be a very definitive presidency on a foreign policy perspective. Of course, we do care more about how the presidency affects us here at home. So many things to break down as well. Largely, the Democrats, are they going to be bullish as they've been with regards to war? We've seen how much money has been poured into Ukraine. And then with Donald Trump, of course, we're all worried about the immigration policies and tariff hikes on imports from China and how those will impact the world. So can't wait to see how it all plays out.
Well, let me start with Kemi Badenoch. Historic achievement, great achievement. And many Nigerians are justifiably saying that this is a statement about the talent that inheres in the average Nigerian child, whether male or female. All of a sudden, we have a Nigerian-born child, we're British-born, Nigerian parentage, becoming the first black female standing at the threshold of, in fact, possibility of becoming the Prime Minister of Great Britain. But what are the issues? Number one issue, apart from congratulating her, is that, look, this shows that the Conservatives are more ethnically diverse than the Labour Party. You recall that when Boris Johnson was leaving, all the people who were the front runners were ex-chancellors of the Exchequer, Javid and Rishi Sunak, who eventually became the Prime Minister. We have also seen in that political party in the UK, the fact that all the women who have been Prime Ministers, they've all come from the Conservative Party, whether it's Margaret Thatcher or it is Theresa May, or, all the women came from that political party. That's the second major point. The third major point is what is, our sister, Kemi Badenoch, going to do going forward. Now, they lost the election in July. The Conservative Party faces a lot of problems. Division within the party. She says she will unite the party. Number two, at the level of policy, she says that she's going to show that it's business that moves a country forward towards growth, not government. Now, that's a repost for the Labour Party. Number three, yesterday, she appointed Harris, the MP from Essex, who has had 7 years' experience as a chief whip, Today, we're going to be talking about Team Kemi Badenoch. Now, who is going to be in that team? Now, they have 121 MPs in the House of Parliament. About 100 of them will be looking for frontbencher positions. And at the end of the day, some of them will play multiple roles. But what is important is that the kind of team that she comes up with will determine whether she sinks or swims as a leader. Now, she will have staffing problems. She will have funding problems. She will have a number of other problems. Because after July, the funders, they pulled back. They stopped. So this is the challenge facing her. But the more important point that you have raised this morning has to do with the minors that were, put in incarceration for over 97 days. Now, the Child Rights Act of 2003, based on the 1979 Declaration of the International Year of the Child and the 2009 Convention on the Rights of the Child, endorsed by 34 states of the 36 states in Nigeria, 278 pages long, about 22 chapters, says that the child deserves to be treated well. And who are these children? Children put in detention for over 90 days. That is wrong. It's an abuse of prosecutorial rights. The prosecutor should ensure justice for society, for the victim, and also for the accused person. Now, in this case, has that been done? I call on the the Attorney General of the Police to invoke his powers under Section 174 of the 1999 Constitution and Section 211 to enter a nolle prosequi. Femi Falana, SAN, has also pointed out that the judges and the chief magistrates, they have failed the Nigerian children, 130 of them involved in this particular matter, by refusing to act under the enabling laws, ACJA, and the Police Act, Section 73 thereof. So these are the issues on the international scene as you brought them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all of your analysis there, Dr. Ruben Vimbai and Rufai. Let's move on to the papers now. And if we take a look at the front page of This Day newspaper this morning, This Day leads with a multitude of stories, but also what you discussed at the beginning of the show, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, again in another exchange of words with the federal government. He's told the federal government that the state of the nation clearly would be held better if the federal government would follow the mandate of his own manifesto. And the federal government have come out to say, actually, no, if we were to follow you, if you were in charge, Nigeria's economy would be in an even worse position. Moving on now to other papers now, both the Punch and the New Telegraph, they report on the trying of the hashtag Mbag governors minors, who the ACF believes their prosecution is showing the Nigerian government as an authoritarian and intolerant government. Clearly words that you don't want associated with your leadership. The paper, that's the New Telegraph, also reports that the neglect of Nigeria's textile industry has cost the country $30 billion importing textile raw materials. Now moving on to the front page of the Daily Trust, the Daily Trust also leads with the story, but its perspective shifts towards the parents and the families of these minor children who have been detained. Their front line says that their families are calling for justice, and we can only hope that that justice does come very soon. If we move on to the front page of the Daily Independent now, the Daily Independent reports on how Nigerian banks have been able to beat economic headwinds by expanding their operations aggressively, not only in Nigeria but across the African continent. And coincidentally enough, the picture headline on the front page of the Daily Independent shows the group chairman of United Bank for Africa, Tony Elumelu, pictured with Angolan President João Lourenço. And what's interesting is clearly he's there talking about, of course, his banking operations and the different workings going on in the Angolan capital, Luanda. So again, another example of how Nigerian banking industry is spreading outside of the country of Nigeria, across the African continent, and clearly in some instances across the world. Moving on to The Guardian now. The Guardian leads with the federal government beginning food imports, with news that 0% duty and 0% VAT on certain food products. That exemption may well continue and be extended because the government is focusing on directly addressing economic and food-related hardship in the country. Also, if we move on to African papers now, Ghana's Daily Graphic is preparing for another election too. Presidential and parliamentary elections in Ghana will take place on the 7th of December. And so on the front page of the Daily Graphic this morning, they're talking about how the use of artificial intelligence is stoking fears that there could be the spreading of fake news and misinformation that could negatively impact the minds of voters ahead of the elections. And then coming back to the United Kingdom, if we take a look at the front page of the Daily Mail has had quite a welcoming headline to Kemi Badenoch. They're calling her the leader who knows how to get the economy booming. It might be a bit preemptive for some. She is, of course, the leader of the Conservative Party, but she's not in power yet. She is not the Prime Minister. What she has to do now is focus on building her shadow government. As you mentioned, Dr. Rubin, she has already appointed a chief whip, and we can imagine that more appointments will be coming on, and we will be able to see what her leadership will look like, if she'll be able to hang on to her position and for the next 3 to 4 years until another election. All very, very exciting things. And then also on the Daily Telegraph, it has a very powerful image of Queen Letizia of Spain comforting Spaniards who have been suffering and reeling from the outcome of that flooding in the country. Also remember that her husband, King Felipe, had quite a difficult response when he came out to meet people. They were throwing mud at him. They were heckling him because they feel as though he hadn't done enough to protect them before the flood, and he hasn't done anything to provide for them thereafter.
Well, thank you very much, Adefemi Akinsanya. Thank you very much indeed. Fingers crossed. U.S. election is tomorrow. We'll see how it turns out.